I guess we should let this guy come in and get
I
started.
guess. There's seats in the back.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Fred Payton. I'm a volunteer here at the Historical Society. When Jerry was looking for a responsible adult to welcome people today, she couldn't find one. So it happened to be me that she stuck with this job. And I'm very happy to do it, I have to say, because one thing that I think is that Barb needs no introduction. She's very well known throughout the community. And we're delighted to have her here to do this presentation today. I think it's going to be something that those of you who have an interest in the Hudson's Bay Company and the activities of the Hudson's Bay Company in the Northwest Territories early on in what is now Canadian history will find it interesting. Those of you who have done genealogical research, I know you're going to find it interesting. You might even get some tips. And those of you who are thinking about doing genealogical history, I'm sure that you're going to find it interesting and will be quite pleased to hear what she has to say, because she'll give you some good ideas. Anyways, we're going to go through the entire presentation, after which, in about 45 minutes or so, Barb is going to give you an opportunity to ask questions. So please hang on to your questions throughout the entire presentation and save them till the end. At the end, we'll have more time for conversation, and we'll have more time for coffee, tea, water, and snacks. And I do have to say thank you to those who, from the board, who have volunteered to help today, and especially those in the kitchen. Thank you very much. And the co-op has donated these wonderful Halloween treats. So thank you very much to the co-op and to Tyler for negotiating that for us. So, I guess we can start.
Okay.
Thank you, Barb.
I'm just gonna grab one.
We have to wait for me. We have to wait until Barb gets talking and I
Oh, okay.
gesture and photo.
I thought you wanted them in the dark.
Maybe I'd like it to be done.
So we're on the boss.
Oh, those bossy reporters.
It won't take a minute.
Okay, well, we'll get started. So thank you so much for joining me here today. A lot of people I know in the crowd. There's some cousins, which is kind of scary because they will know the history probably as well as I do, and they can point out any errors there, but it's great. And thank you very much to Kathy Pryor Hildebrandt, who is a family member as well, but she's my daughter's mother-in-law, and who drove from Saskatoon to be here, so that's very nice. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth here so I can advance the slides. But as Fred mentioned, the interest in family history, I've been interested in it for at least a decade, but most of the research I did was on my mother's side of the family because no one had ever really delved into that. What we're talking about here today is on my father's side of the family, and people have certainly done that research. So it's not my research that I'm presenting, it's other people's work. So I come here very humbly. It's really in tribute to the people who have done that work in the past. So to those who wrote the original documents, to those who kept them over time, and to those who did the research and retold the stories, I am so grateful to them. And thank you too for those in this generation who are interested in genealogy and in history and keep it alive. Especially many of the volunteers here at the museum. So the Hudson Bay Company, you probably know some of the history, and if you don't, I'd refer you to Connie Gerling's presentation on the Hudson Bay Company in Prince Albert, and also she has an article that's available in Folklore magazine that talks about it as well. So the longest running company in Canadian history started in 1670 when the King gave them a charter with massive territory attached. Really all the land that drained into the Hudson Bay, which is most of Western Canada. In the 1700s, you saw the expansion of the fur trade, the tall hats that were favored in English society were made from beaver fur, and so this was a very valuable commodity, and they created arrangements, bought furs from the indigenous people. And there was also competition in the fur trade, because there always is. If there's a good thing going, there's competition in that market. By the 1800s, the fur trade is sort of fading out, but then you see real estate becoming important. Both the homesteads opening up in Western Canada and the Hudson Bay Company itself getting into real estate holdings. In the 1900s, at least the last half of it that most of us remember, we can think about the retail store expansion, where the Bay department stores were well known. We had one here in Prince Albert that I always enjoyed shopping at, and then continued to do that after it closed by going to Saskatoon or Regina. It was always a great place to find good quality products. And if you got them on sale, you could actually afford them. But as you get into the 2000s, the retail operation was consolidating. Fewer and fewer of the department stores. They tried different options, and it just wasn't working. And it's certainly not just the Bay, but you've seen that in other department stores as well. So in 2025, this is last year, we've really seen a lot of news about the liquidation and closure of the stores. And now it's down to the auctioning of the last few pieces of the Hudson Bay Company. I saw just the other day that Canadian Tire has bought many of the trademarks, and they bought the rights to the Hudson Bay Company blankets, the colors of the blankets, and they're going to sell the blankets, which have a bit of a mixed history, but they're going to donate money from the sales to Indigenous charities. So that's a good thing, that we can continue that on. But there was so much talk about the business side of it that as I was reading the news, I kind of felt that the other part was being missed out. So in May, well, actually in April, because there was a federal election got in the way there. In April, I decided I would write a personal essay and submit it to the Globe and Mail. The Globe and Mail has a section called First Person, where people can send in about whatever they're interested in. So I submitted it thinking it would be published in that part of the newspaper, and got a message that they actually wanted to put it on their op-ed page. So as a former reporter, editor from little old Prince Albert, I was pretty pleased to see it published in the Globe and Mail. And it's still on the website if you want to find it and read it. So based on that personal essay, which was really talking about my family's connection to the Hudson Bay Company, I was asked to come and speak today and sort of expand on that story. So what are the legacies of the Hudson Bay Company? Beyond the stores and the business, the ups and downs of the business, there's all the other legacies of the company in Canada. And when you think of a company that's been around for more than 300 years, 350 years, that's a big part of our Canadian history. So effects good and bad on our history. People point out how the Bay was part of the colonial influence on Canada, especially Western Canada, especially affecting the Indigenous people. They were a part of Western settlement as the homesteading was happening. But there's also very positive, you can debate whether those are positive or negative, but things that I think are absolutely positive are things like the archives that are still held in Manitoba, the journals that were kept, the maps that were kept. I read something the other day that said the Hudson Bay Company is the best documented company in all of the world. And I guess part of that is the length of time it's been operating. But also they were very good at keeping archives. So all of these things lead to research and books and family history. And what I have up here are 3 examples. So this is a book that was written by Barbara Mitchell, whose husband is a grandson of W.O. Mitchell, just by chance, but she's a writer and lecturer in Ontario who is also connected to the same family tree that I am. And she took Philip Turner's journals and put those into book form. This is a thesis, front page of a thesis from Tara Turner, who is Dr. Tara Turner, who's a professor at the First Nations University of Canada. And the other is a book that was written by my aunt, Pearl Weston, on which most of this presentation is based. So just from one family tree within the Hudson Bay Company, at least 3 pieces of writing have come out of that. So from my family tree, it goes back to Philip Turner. And he was the first person hired as a surveyor, specifically to be a surveyor for the Hudson Bay Company. As they were expanding across Western Canada, they needed to know where are the rivers, how do we get to places, how do we transport the furs back to the bay, to the Hudson Bay, to ship them off to England. So his job was to be a surveyor. He came from England, son of a farmer. He showed some mathematical abilities, and so they picked him up on that. Because in those days you were using, as the artist's depiction there shows, what would today be very rudimentary equipment to figure out where you were, what the longitude and latitude was, and measuring according to the stars. So mathematics would be a very useful skill. But given the ways of the Hudson Bay Company and the shortage of people, he was also pressed into other duties. So he served as a factory supervisor, and the posts were called factories, not because they manufactured things, but because it was related to the Hudson Bay Company factor, that the person that looked after it. So he was a supervisor and also did exploring and surveying. In 1787, he went back to London and he spent his time making maps out of what he had captured in North America, and then came back to Canada. And at that point, he surveyed into what is now Manitoba more so, and Saskatchewan, and even into Alberta, around the Cumberland House and Isle Lacrosse and Athabasca regions. And then returned to England 1792, the final time, and he spent the rest of his time there completing maps and teaching navigation to others. So what was his legacy? Part of it was the maps that he drew. So this is a photo of a map that's at the Hudson Bay Company archives, and it's huge, as you can tell, but they can only unroll it a very little bit. because to go any further would probably destroy it. It would crack, and so there was supposed to be restoration work going on. I'm not sure how far they've gotten on that.
If anybody's interested, I have a copy of the map on a wall in my house. I'll be more than happy to make a cup of tea. You'll need a magnifying glass to read it, but it's big.
I was going to mention too, the backdrop is on these slides is a reproduction of one of his maps as well. Another thing that he did was he created journals, very detailed journals, and as I mentioned, Barbara Mitchell's book draws from those journals. They are available online. So the handwritten journals that he did back in the 1700s were maintained at the Hudson Bay Company archives. And in 1934, Tyrrell found out about them, found them, and got permission to publish them in a book. And they're now available for any of us to read online. However, they're pretty dry, I would say, from the bit I've tried to decipher, so I would suggest Barbara Mitchell's book, Mapmaker, is a much better choice. She mixes it in with her own impressions of the land. She goes to some of the places that he traveled to and talks about them today, and also talks about her family. So he was known for his maps. He was known as a teacher. He taught David Thompson. There was a winter where David Thompson had fractured his leg and so couldn't travel. And wintertime in the 1700s, I don't suppose you'd want to be traveling too much at any rate. They happened to be at the same place, so he taught him some surveying skills, and also Peter Fiddler. And some of the other things that have been done to commemorate his name, Turner Lake in northern Saskatchewan is named for Philip Turner. There's also a plaque at Moose Factory that commemorates him. There was a commemorative coin created. And in 2013, I believe, the Hudson Bay Company Foundation, charity foundation, which would do a teddy bear every year to raise money for charity, did Philip Bear in his honor. So that was some of his legacies. But what I think, because it's my family history, is the most important legacy is really the family that began in Canada. So he had a country marriage to an Indigenous woman at Moose Factory. And Moose Factory is in Ontario, around Thunder Bay area. And we don't know her name. It wasn't recorded in the Hudson Bay Company records or in his journals. But in the journals, he does acknowledge her existence, and he acknowledges her contributions. And they had at least one child, Joseph Turner, who was born about 1782. And if you want to know more about women in the fur trade days, especially these country marriages, so they weren't legal in the sense that they were church blessed, but they were relationships. And the women were a very important part of not only that they had children and were supported in that way, but they probably kept the fur traders alive. If you think about the men coming from Europe, it was a hard life in Europe for most people at those times too, but incredibly hard here in the wilds of what is today Canada. They would have perished, I am sure, without the knowledge that the Indigenous people shared with them. So the book Many Tender Ties by Sylvia Van Kirk is a really good resource if you're interested in learning more about that, or if there's a connection to your family. So interestingly, Philip Turner also had a wife in England, and that one was church blessed, and as far as we know, they didn't have any children, but as his legal widow, she got some small compensation from the Hudson Bay Company after he passed away. Not much. I'm sure. So here's the family tree, and I don't expect you to read this. But it kind of shows how from one person, so it starts up top here with Philip Turner, and then the son, Joseph Turner. So then he marries Emma. Again, we don't really know what her surname was, or her indigenous name if she had one. It's not even clear whether she was Cree or Cree Scottish. But at any rate, she's just recorded in the Hudson Bay Company records as Mrs. Turner, or as Emma. But they married and had a family of several children, and I'm trying to show where the one line that connects to me shows up here. So we'll see. So they marry and they have children. Joseph Turner Jr. And then Joseph marries into the Umperville family. And they have children, including Amy, who marries John Thompson, who we'll hear about in a few minutes, also was in the Hudson Bay Company. And then among Amy's children, oops, I went the wrong way, sorry. Going backwards there. Was my grandmother, Hazel, who married a Campbell, was a Campbell, and then married a Hazelwood. And so then there's my dad, Lawrence, here, Tyler's dad, here, and my aunt, Pearl, who wrote the history book that most of this is taken from, was a sister as well. So Pat would also have a line on this chart that's just slightly onto a different part. On this,
Mary Turner, daughter of Joseph Jr.
Yeah. So when you think about all the names that are here, even if you can't read them, and there's at least another 3 generations past this, because this, you just can't fit anymore on there, and this is sort of representative of the time that the family history was created. But there are literally thousands and thousands of people that can trace their history back to this one person within the Hudson Bay Company. And as an example of that, when I was at SAS Polytech, working for SAS Polytech, I was working with a woman from Confederation College in Ontario on a conference. And we got talking, and she mentioned something about Moose Factory, that she had family from there, and I said, I got a connection there too. Turner, oh yeah, sure. Soon enough we compared family trees and figured out that we were distantly related, so we're everywhere. So the rest of the story is really about the family tree. I'm sure that Philip Turner probably thought that his biggest accomplishments were the maps that he created and the journals that he left, if he took time to think about it, really. And certainly those were important, because they pointed the way for further map making and exploration. But I think the family is equally important. So his son, Joseph Turner Sr., so Philip and Joseph's mother were together for a time around Moose Factory. Philip goes back to England. When he comes back, he's reassigned by the Hudson Bay Company. Chances are they never saw each other after the time they were together. There's not really any record that they reconnected. But Joseph was raised with his mother's family near Moose Factory. And because of the connection to English society, or not society, but the English side of the company, he learned to read and write. He could speak English and speak Cree, and so he was a very valuable employee of the Hudson Bay Company, of course. Where would you go to work but at the Hudson Bay Company? So he apprenticed beginning at age 16, and one piece I was reading said that he rose as high as a British person could in the company. So he was actually master of some of the houses that he looked after. He's also recorded as being a very good carpenter. So the graphic here is his record within the Hudson Bay Company archives. So from all the post records that were done, again, handwritten back in the day, they have been put into typewritten form, and they're now available online. So if you have a connection to the Hudson Bay Company or think that someone within your family may have been a part of it, you can go online and search for them. And for each employee, give or take, some might have been missed, there is a sheet that will tell you a lot of good information, you know, where they worked, what their jobs were. There's even some details here about who they married and even who the children married. And so very valuable information if you're doing genealogical research. You can also figure out where the children may have been born by where they were working at that time. So Emma, the unknown Emma, was either Cree or Cree Scottish, and as I mentioned, she was recorded only as Mrs. Turner in the records, but she was noted for her hard work and her skills in trapping, netting fish, and her ability to tend to the sick. She was also, in her spare time, mother to 13 children, most of whom were either employed by the Hudson Bay Company as they grew older or married Hudson Bay Company men. And this is a graphic I found from the Métis Nation of Ontario that shows this family, the Joseph and Emma Turner's family, and sort of the scope of their influence within Western Canada. So right down at the bottom of the Hudson Bay is where Moose Factory is. They're kind of in the center. The blue lines are my family lines, Joseph Turner Jr. But then there's all the other children too, and all the connections that they made. So it's kind of amazing from just one family how far afield they may have gone. Among those children was Joseph Turner Jr., and again we have his Hudson Bay Company record here, and he was also born at Moose Factory. He married Sarah Umperville from another long-standing Hudson Bay Company family. So her father, I'm just going to see if I can find the notes here. So Edward Umperville was Sarah's father, and it's certainly a well-known name in the Hudson Bay Company records as well. He worked for the company. He was a part of the establishment of Cumberland House, along with Samuel Hearn, and then he was back at York Factory, back on the bay, and the French attacked, and the French took people from the fort prisoner for 8 years. So they were in France, held prisoner for 8 years. And when they were released, he decided enough at the Hudson Bay Company, and he joined the Norwest Company, which was the main competitor. After a time, he tired of that, but he published a book in 1790 titled The Present State at Hudson Bay, which was highly critical of the company. And he was not rehired. So there's intermarriages between the Turners and the Umpervilles and various connections there. So in this case, Joseph and Sarah had another large family, had 13 children, and he worked at York Factory on Hudson Bay, but also Cumberland. And in his case, 1853, so he starts in 1830, 22 years later, he decides he's going to retire from the company, and he goes to the Red River Settlement to join the Church Missionary Society. And probably he did some studies, some theological studies, but he was never ordained as a minister, that we know of anyway. Sorry, I was going to point out one thing there. So it's kind of interesting to me anyhow. In the corner there where my aunt, Pearl Weston, her research is now captured in the Hudson Bay Company archives as well. So she had obviously, in her research about the family, shared information with them she had gathered from other places, and they included it on this sheet for the benefit of others. So Joseph Turner ends up at Fort LaCorne, at the mission there. And my Cree pronunciation is so bad, I'm not going to try, because I'll probably mess it up. But how he ended up there was Reverend Henry Budd, and is known as the first Indigenous Canadian minister in the Anglican Church. But he was actually Cree born and then was adopted into an English family. And they became friends at some point along the way, both working for the Hudson Bay Company. And so when Henry Budd was assigned to the mission across the river from the fort at the post at Fort LaCorne, Joseph and the family came and joined to support him. And the graphic there is just a portion of Henry Budd's journals, which again, a wonderful resource to learn about the daily life at the fort and things about families. And there was one quote where he said, "Sat up late with Mr. Turner." And you just kind of imagine what they might have been talking about. It could have been very practical things like we need to fix the roof. And it could have also been some pretty deeply philosophical discussions as well. So within the journal, you can see the friendship, you can see the work they were doing, and it also records some of the Turner family births, deaths, and in this case, marriage. So in the middle there, it talks about him performing the ceremony for Emma Turner when she married John Thompson. So at Fort LaCorne, this is a picture of kind of what it looks like today. It's only accessible by river, my understanding is, because it's all very overgrown. Pat's probably tried it.
I've been there.
Yeah. And apparently it's quite a hike up the hill, and it's very overgrown, although some of it has been cleaned up so that it can be accessed. And there's also been some archaeological work done there where they've taken out equipment for ground penetrating radar, and they found where the buildings were and probably graves, although there's no headstones or to really be sure. So this is part of what was Joseph Turner's journal at that time, talking about just the occurrences at Fort LaCorne. And again, it's a really interesting part of finding out what went on a day-to-day basis, or who the person was, rather than just the bare genealogical details of birth, marriage, and death. But by 1875, Reverend Budd had passed away. His successor, who had been placed there, had also passed away. Forest fires were threatening the region, and the mission was eventually abandoned. And so Joseph, after Sarah had passed away, ends up moving into Prince Albert, and he moved in with his son Philip. And so this is a colorized version of a picture of Philip and his wife. Philip was in charge of the Hudson Bay Company store in Prince Albert in the 1870s. So about the same time you have land surveying going on. And 1870, Hudson Bay Company sells the claim to Rupert's Land. You know, they're given it by the king in 1670. A couple hundred years later, they sell it. And I had written down here how much they sold it for. So they sold it for 300,000 British pounds, plus 1/20th of the land in the area. And so this is a sort of a generic demonstration of how the townships would be divided up. And you can see where there's land allocated to the Hudson Bay Company. So then they had that land to sell or develop as they saw fit. You also see the CPR got a pretty good chunk to pay for them developing the railways across Western Canada. There was an allocation for schools, and then the ones that are listed as government were what were divided up for homesteads. But that 300,000 pounds today would be about 85 million Canadian dollars, plus the value of the land. Joseph and Sarah actually had a claim to a homestead near the post, and he had enough forethought to have a will, and eventually the land was divided among their children after his will was probated. So this was kind of the beginning of the switch from fur to farm. Emma Turner, the oldest daughter of Joseph and Sarah, was born at Cumberland House. So this would be my great-grandmother. And there's stories of her working with her father and hunting and trapping. There was one story of them when she was maybe 14 years old, out in the canoe with her father in the river, and a couple of moose come upon them. They're out there checking their nets for fishing, and so are unarmed. And these two moose come up the river, and so her father paddles frantically and gets around the moose, tries to drive the moose back towards the fort. And he's yelling ahead for somebody to get their gun or, come out and do something because here's meat. And so they did manage to get them. And then I guess the question was, well, whose is it to claim? Was it the person who drove the moose down to the fort, or was it the one who actually delivered the kill? But so her work is actually captured in some of the records. It's talked about the kind of work that she did. Of course, the women did not get paid for their work, but they were still contributing. And she married John Thompson, sometimes spelled with a P, sometimes with not, who was a member of the Hudson Bay Company in 1859 at the Mission. So the photo there, obviously not a very good photo, but it is a picture of four of the sisters of Emma, Sarah, and Joseph, obviously later in their lives. And this is the marriage certificate from the Mission with Henry Budd's signature on it as the minister who performed the ceremony. So John Thompson, who was also Emma's husband, who was also with the Hudson Bay Company, came to Canada, came to the Hudson Bay Company from the Orkney Islands, which was a much more typical path than perhaps Philip's path. I have never been to the Orkney Islands, but I hear even today they are very rugged, and it was a tough life. And so the Hudson Bay Company was smart enough to figure out that if you could live there, you might be better suited to live in the wilds of North America. And so he rose in the company. He started out as a laborer, an interpreter, postmaster. He was also placed at Moose Woods, which, and I'm just thinking of Kathy, is somewhere near Dundurn.
It's south of Saskatoon,
Yeah,
and if you intersect going west from Dundurn, south from Saskatoon, that's where it's situated.
okay. So he traveled back and forth from Moose Woods and Fort LaCorne. Emma's family was still at Fort LaCorne, and so their family, as they began to have children, lived for some time at Moose Woods and also at Fort LaCorne. And in late 1868, he was coming from Moose Woods to Fort LaCorne. Their party went missing for 3 weeks. They didn't know where there was no communication to say where they were at. They did finally make it to Fort LaCorne, but he had picked up a bad respiratory illness of some kind along the way, and he died shortly thereafter at Fort LaCorne. So here's Emma. So John was 36. She was younger. She was maybe 30. And she's got 6 children to look after and no husband. So John Thompson is one of those, his grave is one of the ones at the mission that has no marker, but that's the location. So Emma, as a widow, did her best. She had her parents there, and she raised her children at Fort LaCorne near her parents, with her parents. The area is known as Turnerville, and this is a census record from 1901. And what I've circled here, again, it's very hard to read, but we have the Thompson family, we have the Goodlad family, we have Umpervilles, we have Sayes. They all connect back to the Turner family. It was daughters who married into other families as well. So I remember finding out that Bernice Sayes, who was one of Prince Albert's Citizens of the Year, and it was actually a Citizen of the Year banquet that we got talking, and I found out that we were related, and I was so excited that we were related. But it's easy to see why it was known as Turnerville, because everybody was a Turner in some way. So Emma, as a widow, the children had to be out working at a very young age. So the sons got farmland after they had been working on farms for a while, and her sons Philip and Joseph both farmed relatively near Fort LaCorne. And so you can see on the map there, the circle to the right, to your right, shows the Fort LaCorne area, the Hudson Bay Company Reserve, and then James Smith Cree Nation today, and then Glen Mary, which is where the church is, and the star is approximately where Emma's homestead was, because she was living on some land for a time, and then finally decided she would apply for a homestead for it, and she did get a homestead. And then as she got older, she lived with her son, and her sons and Emma are buried at Glen Mary Cemetery, Anglican Church. And it's a beautiful little church out in between Weldon and Canistino. Very well kept, lovely little place. And I find it interesting that it's a pretty impressive headstone for Emma, the larger one there. I guess her sons looked after that and felt that she needed to be honored. And then there, for the 2 sons, very modest markers. So we're now into the farming days rather than the Hudson Bay Company so much. But I wanted to finish up the story here, otherwise you'll wonder, how did it all end? So Emma and John had a daughter who they also named Emma, but who was known as Amy, no doubt to distinguish her from her mother's name. And so she was only about 4 years old when her father died. In the family history book, the story is retold of her remembering crossing the river because the The fort, the Hudson Bay Company post was on one side of the river and the mission was on the other. And crossing the river in January to go to her father's funeral service and burial. And she just barely remembered that. So at age 9, she came to Prince Albert. She was working at the home of John MacDonald, a relative. And the idea was that she was supposed to get schooling. Well, schooling always came after the chores, and there were a lot of chores to be done. So the oval there shows approximately where MacDonald's home was. So these are all the river lots in Prince Albert. So where the oval is approximately 6th Avenue East, and then they're divided into river lots going west all the way out past the modern-day penitentiary. And so that's where she was living. Part of her job was to go to the river and haul water back for the household, also to chase cattle, to return the cattle that like to wander along the riverbank. And so many times when I'm driving down River Street, I kind of think of that and what it must have been like for her to be trying to get these cattle under control, especially since she was so young. If you have property that is west of 6th Avenue East, and you look on your land title, you can probably find out what river lot you are on. So the little orange star there is approximately where our house is on between 3rd and 4th Avenue West. And I was told that the river lots run back as far as, say, the Canadian Tire area, even into that depth of Prince Albert, because the Catholic cemetery, the old Catholic cemetery that is out by Rose Garden Hospice, is on the same river lot as Sacred Heart Cathedral, but this was a designated Catholic river lot. So at age 14, she got hired by the Morris Macbeth family in the Colliston area. So one of the good things about moving to Prince Albert, she didn't get a lot of schooling. She learned to read and write and then taught herself more. But she also got to be friends with people such as the Miller family, the Miller's Hill family there, and also the Macbeth family. They had a daughter about the same age. So at age 14, she's asked to go and be their hired girl on the farm in the Colliston area, and I'm sure she was quite pleased to do that. So from that connection, she met up with George Campbell, who was an Irish farmer who had come west from Ontario, looking for a homestead, probably looking for a wife too, but, and they were married January 1st, 1884. So there's a little clipping there from the Prince Albert Times that a party was given on New Year's evening at Mr. Macbeth's to celebrate the marriage of Mr. G. Campbell and Miss Emma Jane Thompson, and after tripping the light fantastic till an early hour, the party dispersed. And off they went to the homestead. So they settled on a homestead in the Stanleyville area, along what is now known as Campbell Road. And there's a picture there of the sign designated Campbell Road. They had a family of 12 children, and once again, the husband died. He wasn't particularly young, he was 60, but the family was still quite young. The youngest was only about 4 years old. And so you can see the house they had there, pretty small for raising a large family. So George is standing, Emma's beside him, seated, and some of their children, including my grandmother, is the third one over, seated there. And so Emma and George are now buried at the Colliston United Church Cemetery, which is just east of Prince Albert along 302. So you get to the farming background, and so the blue star down in the corner is where the Campbell homestead was. It's right up against the South Saskatchewan River, and that's where George and Emma raised their family, and the oval is just indicating that's Campbell Road. So this is RM of Prince Albert, obviously the city of Prince Albert. So there's Campbell Road over there, and then there's also Hazelwood Road, because Hazel Campbell met Ernest Hazelwood, so she became Hazel Hazelwood. And he was a World War I soldier who claimed a homestead as a soldier settlement, and that's where the approximately where the other blue star is there. So there's Hazelwood Road is named as well, and it runs past the land that they homesteaded. Plus there's other land along there that is owned by descendants, and also the along Campbell Road, a great deal of the land is owned by the descendants of George and Emma, including my brother. And along Hazelwood Road, some is owned by my cousin Tyler and his mom and brother. So in both cases, the farmland has been in the same family for over 100 years. So even just the farming history stretches out over quite a long time. So the upper picture is Hazel and Ernest, and the really cute little boy there with his cap on is my dad, and then his siblings. And down in this picture, he's got the reins to the horse, of course, because he's the oldest, and he's taking his siblings for a ride. So that's kind of the family history part. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about Métis status, because clearly if there's an Indigenous side to the family and a non-Indigenous side, the results can be Métis. So the Hudson Bay Company men and the Indigenous women, their children were considered half-breed or Métis. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there about who is legitimately Métis, and these days you have talk of pretendians who are taking on Indigenous status, sometimes for the purpose of, helping their own careers, I think especially in academia. But in Canada, indigeneity is really a legal concept. That you are what you are because the law allows you to be. It's not about how much blood or what your DNA results show. I mean, people will get DNA tests. I did, and it kind of just confirms things that you may have already thought, perhaps, or maybe starts a conversation. But it's not about proving it through DNA or through blood. It's about meeting the requirements for Métis membership, meeting the requirements of your provincial organization. So the number one thing that you have to show is that you are not First Nations, that you're not a treaty holder, status holder, because that's a different Indigenous group. So within Saskatchewan, it's really about being able to show your connection, about being accepted by the association, and not being of any other Indigenous group. So one of the ways you can establish this is through documents like script records. And so this is a script record for my great-grandmother, Emma Thompson Campbell. And this goes back to 1885, when the government was trying to settle land, basically settle land claims. And so for the Métis people, they offered them a payout, essentially, through scrip. And you can argue about whether they got ripped off or not, but when you think about the way they were living at the times, any amount of money would have been helpful to them. So most people just signed on the dotted line and took some money, which really wasn't a whole lot $100 or maybe $200 in some cases from what I have read. But it's interesting on here where you had to attest to, who are your parents. So she's saying her father was a Scotchman, her mother was a half-breed. So, do you have a Métis identity or not? Sometimes it's not recognized as such. And for me, until my aunt did the family history research, and that was when I was in my 30s, I really didn't know anything about this history at all. I don't know whether she was surprised or not as she dug into it and found the Indigenous connection, especially, as well as all the Hudson Bay Company connections. But I think there were some hints along the way, but it really wasn't something that was talked about. And when you think back to the times, it's no wonder, because parents will do what they can to protect their children, and given the prejudice that existed, especially in the late 1800s and early 1900s, you could understand why they wouldn't be celebrating or sharing too much about Indigenous heritage. So, as well, it's often not recorded. If you look at census records, usually all the children get the ethnicity of their father. Mother's just kind of out of the picture. But this one I found interesting. This is a 1905 record from this area, census record, and it actually has my grandmother's family there. So in the circle, in the oval, it shows George Campbell as Irish, and then Emma, his wife, as Cree half-breed, and then all the children as Cree half-breed. And there's others on the same sheet that were designated in that way. And it's interesting that, for whatever reason, the census taker decided to do that in 1905. The good news, I think, is that today we're much more accepting and willing to celebrate all of our family background, because this is just as much a part of my heritage as the part that's German, the part that's Scottish, the part that's Irish, all of it. So when you think about it, these are not pictures from my family, these are just Prince Albert pictures. But you had the Hudson Bay Company men who came from Europe. You have these beautiful Indigenous women. I like this picture so much because they're wearing ribbon skirts. And I love the ribbon skirts. It kind of shows the heritage, the origins of ribbon skirts that we see so much today. And, they came together, and you end up with the Métis culture. And this is a piece of artwork by Leah Dorian, a Prince Albert artist. And I love her work because it's so joyful, it's so celebratory, and at any rate, it kind of makes me think of the Métis sash. Things get woven together. You're stronger when you're together. And I really find great hope in the fact that my grandchildren especially are very proud of their Indigenous history, as well as all the other parts of their family history. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here today, and because I have to, because I was trained when I did my studies, you have to give your sources. So thank you very much, everyone.